It was about a month or so ago that my wife Leslie was driving up Cobequid Road on her way to Beacon House when out of nowhere an animal darted right in front of her car and bam, they collided. She phoned me in a bit of a panic that her car had come into contact with something. I said, "So you hit it?" I was quickly corrected that no, it ran into me. And concerned, she turned around to see what had happened and what had hit her car. But whatever it was had disappeared. We later assumed that it was probably a coyote. Thankfully, it wasn't a skunk. It was an old guy in Lunenburg who used to say, "Those things can even go off when they're dead." Well, the result was a broken bumper, a mangled fog light, some undercarriage damage that would mean the car would have to be in the shop for at least 10 days, and due to COVID delays, parts were getting harder and harder to get there quickly. So she needed a car, so she was given a rental to use. Now this car, her car is a pretty basic car, but this one had all the bells and the whistles on it, and it had a backup camera in it. Now she was not too sure about using it for parking, and she kept turning around because she said, "I don't trust it." But she noticed, too, that when she put the car in drive, for a short time, this backup mirror would still be on the screen in the dashboard. She laughed and said, "I wonder how many people get distracted by looking at the screen through a camera that's facing backwards." Then she said, "Well, there's an accident waiting to happen. What a distraction." And we all know the dangers of distracted driving. And yet, many people still pick up their cell phones, they read their texts, and even worse, sometimes try to respond to a text while they're driving. They try to enter a new thing on Google or whatever else they're looking for. But copious studies over the years have shown that two things that you should never try to do is to drive a car and to use a cell phone. The two are just not compatible, and you should never do them both at the same time. So you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with our readings today? Well, peculiarly, a lot. You see, many scholars agree that Luke's message is yet another instance of Jesus communicating the difficulty of commitment and discipleship. In truth and reality, Jesus is telling us that distracted discipleship will not suffice. It just does not make the cut. We have to take notice that Jesus is described by Luke as being resolute. That's an interesting word, resolute. It means to be purposeful, determined, and unwavering. And his face is set toward Jerusalem so that he may be taken up. Now, Luke is not singularly talking about Jesus being hung on the cross, but he's talking about the entire chronology, the full story of the events leading to his resurrection and finally his ascension into heaven. Jesus is on a mission. He is fully dedicated, fully focused to be obedient to his Father and the will of the triune God. So much so that Jesus is often rejected and not received, in this case, by the Samaritan town that he, James, and John are now passing through. We know that throughout time and in Scriptures that there was not much love lost between the Jews and the Samaritans. Now, James and John, they're not impressed with the lack of welcome, and they want permission to call down heavenly vengeance on the Samaritans for their slight against Christ. Probably not purely of holy intentions, but more filled with a nationalistic motivation towards the Samaritans, and one that they felt was the proper response for the snub towards their master and teacher. But Jesus turns and he rebukes them. Why? Because this is not his way. James and John are taught a lesson in discipleship, and it cannot be one of being distracted. I wonder if we might think about Jesus' words on discipleship in a similar way. We can either be his disciple or a disciple of our nation, our culture, and our society, or whatever else we want to have lead us. When we try to follow Jesus but still keep national views and cultural values that might keep us from seeking the kingdom, we are discipling distracted. The one who resolutely set his face to Jerusalem will have none of it. We know that Jesus is teaching us to embolden us to a discipleship that is transformative. How many times have we heard that? To be transformative. And this can give us a new direction that has a great influence on our beliefs to be loving people who truly discover through Jesus' pure love the willing of the good for the other, to be transformed to him. This was demonstrated to James and to John, and although in the presence of their rabbi, they had failed to remember how Jesus was able, by deed and by word, to give the woman at the well. Remember the woman at the well? Yes, she's a Samaritan. And this transformation to become a believer who is then inspired to go and evangelize to her people, she becomes a disciple. Jesus, even when rejected, is still able to love all whom he encounters. Perhaps this was the lesson he was teaching James and John in his rebuke towards them. It was not accomplished by anger, but in a loving, teachable moment. Now, as this gospel unfolds, we encounter the would-be disciples. The three who appear to be very well-intentioned, but have been entrapped by a life that has a very strong grip on them. They have a bad case, this is a word I made up, of but-itis. To clarify, they want to do something, but first I must do something else. They are challenged, like many in today's world, to unravel themselves from the things of this world that anchor them down and get in the way of following Jesus the Christ. These anonymous encounters along the road prove the point how discipleship can be difficult. And throughout the narrative, we are never told if these three ever came around, but it serves as an invitation to us to have consideration to how we might respond. If we break open the three scenarios, we find that the first person seems ready and willing, saying, "I will follow you wherever you go." Jesus answers that the going will never stop. And while others, even God's creatures, have a place to rest and call home, the Son of Man does not. His is a world about facing establishment rejections, never feeling truly at home in any culture or place, of being so very aware of being different. You see, discipleship to Christ is often very countercultural. I mean, just look at the world we're living in today in 2022. For the second and third persons, the distractions to becoming fully devoted to discipleship, to Jesus, are they are front and center. The second person is invited to come and follow by Jesus, but the person responds with the need to complete some cultural duties. In this case, was I have to bury my father. Perhaps this person thinks or rationalizes that they are wrapping up their cultural and social duties in order to be able to let them go. But in reality, they are showing how tied they are to what they are actually thinking about. Not to mention how they are keeping the link to belonging to that identity. They have kept in step with expectations for so long that it is very hard. They say yes, and then we have the heavy but. First, let me quickly do this. It is entirely a distracted response. And to be fair, it is quite difficult to let go of the cultural and secular values that we have been taught in our society. I would even say they are probably drilled into us. But there are some points here to ponder. The high calling of bearing the fruit of the Spirit as a disciple of Christ leads to an authentic discipleship, not as a precursor or a mandatory activity discipleship, but one that has a directional flow of a Christian discipleship that has a spiritual influence upon us in all our worldly vocations. In other words, is what I action accomplished in a way that it is in the spirit of and for discipleship with Christ? And from the very beginning, because of the way that we're wired as individuals and in societies, we are distracted, and we are really in need of clarity, in need of keeping our eyes clearly fixed on Jesus, the resurrected Jesus and the ascended Lord. Likewise, with the third person who wants to do a very respectable thing and say goodbye to their kin before following Jesus. But Jesus likens this person's actions to the farmer who, while plowing his field, turns his head to look behind. By doing so, the farmer is going to make an awful mess of the rows, because it will be impossible to walk a straight line forward while looking backwards. It's kind of like that rear view mirror in the car. I remember hearing this quote when I was in my work career over the years, and it was from the hockey legend Wayne Gretzky, and he put it this way: I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been. So how much of the church is struggling to look forward to where Jesus is leading us because they are struggling by looking backward to a reality long gone? Like Elisha and Kings, we must be all in. We cannot do this halfway. Elisha is chosen by Elijah to continue the works of the prophecy. And like one of the would-be disciples, he wants to bid farewell to his kin. He knows that he must move forward by becoming all in. You heard in the reading that he has 12 yoked oxen. But he knows that he has to let that go. He has to cut the ties with his past. So he slaughters the oxen and then uses the equipment off the oxen, the wooden yokes, to create a fire, to boil them up and give to the people to eat. That is truly looking forward, and there is no return. This becomes total commitment. The person looking backward is in clear contrast to Jesus, whose face is set to Jerusalem as part of his own obedient discipleship to the will of the Father. With distracted discipleship, Jesus' warning rings true. No one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God. So we need the Spirit to put Christ in us if we're going to do this undistracted. There is no such thing is a part-time disciple, and we need to continuously examine and keep on guard how discipleship can become distracted. Being pressured to become distracted by becoming entangled with something that is not in keeping with following the pathway of and to Jesus. As we journey along the way, we too can sometimes feel that we have no place to rest our head. We will sometimes get distracted, and we will sometimes veer away, but we will have the loving grace of God to pull us back. We must turn our faces resolutely back towards the truth. That truth is in Christ. The final destination is where we share in the fruits of our journey through authentic discipleship to Him. But we are never alone. Thankfully, we have an ultimate, utterly undistracted, faithful one who counts us as His own.